Proverbs 24:11 through 12. Deliver those who are being taken away to death, and those who are stumbling to the slaughter. Oh, hold them back. If you say, behold, we did not know this, does not he who weighs the hearts understand? And does not he who guards your soul know? And will he not render to man according to his work? That's Proverbs 24:11 through 12. We appreciate you tuning into another episode of Theologic as we discuss a rather heavy topic, but a good topic. Yeah. Sean wisely suggested that passage be read, and I would agree wholeheartedly now that I think about it that it is absolutely relevant to what we're going to be talking about. And so we'll dialogue maybe a little bit in that, but thanks for tuning in to another episode of Theologic as we discuss the sound of freedom. Zach Deacon here.
Zach Packey.
Sean Mushton.
We appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't seen this movie, to suggest that you go see it is an understatement.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I appreciate it, and this isn't spoiling anything. After the credits, the head actor, am I saying his last name right? Caviezel?
Yeah, Jim Caviezel.
Yeah, so Jim Caviezel at the end, after the credits, reminds us that there is an opportunity for us to pay it forward to get people to go to this movie. And so I heard on the radio, I think it was yesterday, that it cost them $15 million to make the movie roughly, and they've grossed over $100 million. And so we can praise God for that.
Yeah.
So people are getting out and seeing it, but if you have not seen it, please go out and see it. And so we did. We saw it at a local movie theater.
And about that pay it forward, that's on angelstudios.com. Yeah. If you go to their website, they're the production company for this, or at least the ones that released it. Mm-hmm. And that's where you'll find the opportunity to pay it forward. And if you can't afford a ticket, it's at the same webpage that you can purchase a ticket. Well, not say purchase, but you can register to receive a free ticket that someone has paid forward for you to have so that you're able to go see it. And I would also echo this, that this is not original to me, but I think I can reinforce this as we continue on this discussion. But pastors and church leaders, I would encourage you to make a way for persons in your congregation that may not be able to afford it to get them there, even if it doesn't mean using Angel Studios, pay it forward, get some money out of the church budget. But I would argue that any man of God needs to go see this movie.
Yeah, I guess maybe to start, just like we should with any movie, just use discernment in what you're choosing to watch and who you're bringing along with. This may be a little too scary certainly scary for little kids. You would want to bring adults. This would be a wise thing for just adults to go see that. And by the way, it's not a Christian film, in spite of what we'll say the news media, popular news media will say. They're trying to say it's a faith-based film. I think they're trying to do that in order to get people not to watch it, because generally faith-based films, just be honest, are not in very good quality. And this is, it's still good and it's still necessary. It raises up an important topic, especially not just politically, morally, but also for us as Christians as well. So
I'm going to give a quick 30-second just rundown of what the movie is about. No spoiler alerts here, but just in case you're not overly familiar with it, what we're looking at here is a movie about a family, a father and two kids, and through a scandal, the two kids are abducted and they get taken into sex trafficking. And through a series of events, Jim Caviezel's character, Tim Ballard, gets essentially brought into the story to go and to search out these children, and it takes a lot to get them both back. And through this journey that he goes on, he's transformed in how he thinks about crime and how he thinks about even life in general. But then through the story, the audience gets to see, through narrative, some of the very harsh realities that we oftentimes don't allow ourselves to open our eyes to.
Yeah.
Realities that data and stats just don't really get at.
Right.
And Caviezel, like Deacon was mentioning a moment ago, when he addresses the audience at the very end, right after the credits, he makes that point that this is a story that it is a true story. It's based on real events from Tim Ballard's life, but it's also a way in which they bring to the attention of the audience the realities of what goes on in the sex trade, in child trafficking. And that's hard stuff to think about. It's hard stuff to have to sit and watch, although there's never anything that is, how should we say, explicitly sexual,
Praise
but very,
God.
very strong innuendo and very, very strong,
what's happening.
weighty moments that, as a father of 3 daughters, I probably about cried 4 or 5 times during this movie.
Yeah.
But as a friend of mine said to me a couple days after I watched it, and I said that I don't think we should be pressing people to see it that don't want to see it. My friend wisely said, that's the problem, is that as Americans and as many people of Western culture, we are able to keep a safety bubble of comfort around us, this pretty life. And we don't have to face those realities. And until we allow ourselves to step into an uncomfortable sphere where those harsh realities are brought to our attention, we will never be as zealous as we could be to see an end.
Yeah, I like how part of the conversation about this is kind of like Uncle Tom's Cabin was to slavery back in the 1800s, and how it drove people's attention to it and was sort of a catalyst to ending slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation, and so on. This is a modern form of legit slavery. There's no way around this. There are those who stand up and decry chattel slavery, which was what it was in the 1800s, and yet they have not opened their eyes, as Sean is saying, to the form of sex slavery that we're seeing going on around the world. And it's one of the things that was really striking about it to me was, you could sell some. I don't know if this was from an interview or from the movie itself, but you could sell, a pound of cocaine to someone. It's there, it's consumed, it's gone. But a person could be sold 4 or 5 times a day, and for this reason, the sex trafficking itself has a high amount of money that is
generating
going
billions of dollars every year.
Yeah, in some ways more than the drug trafficking ever really could, because of that kind of background to it, the monetary gain that could be seen in this modern form of slavery.
Human trafficking brings along with it the same type of, I don't even know how to say it. I mean, usage is the word that comes to mind. It feels horrible saying it that way, but really, I mean, people end up becoming like quite literally slaves, whether it be they're not paid or they're underpaid or they're thrown into awful work conditions. And, this was, really good timing as I went to the border a month ago.
Yeah, talk about that.
And we were pretty explicitly told that people get up here, and again, we live in Northwest Iowa, for those maybe listening to us, they get up here and anywhere through cartel activity, and they end up becoming slaves to the cartel because the price is so high that they end up needing to get up here, and then they're just sending their money back to them, and so you have this. I
don't want to be too descriptive here, but you're saying through the sex trade, that activity, they're making money to send back to the cartel. Is that what you're?
Yeah, either through the sex trafficking or just the human trafficking. So human trafficking being for more labor. Yeah, and so we were down there, and they told us on average it's $5,000 to $7,000 a head, depending on what country you're coming from. And I don't necessarily have that cash just laying around, and so I would assume that these folks maybe wouldn't either. And so you're having to work that off, and it turns into, send half your paycheck down to us and pay off our debts, or we kill your family back here or something like that, and so it's just a web of nastiness and evil. And really, we have created the demand. Towards the end, I think it was at the end of the movie that we saw those statistics about America being the consumer of a lot of this stuff. Yeah. And so I don't know. I would just kind of leads me into the first question for everybody. I just wrestle with it, like, where do we go from here? What do we do? I liked how he kind of insinuated the fact that it's like the abortion issue. He didn't say this. This is just went through my mind. It's like the abortion issue. Like 65 million children being killed in the womb is not something that you can fathom. And so this is something that is almost unfathomable. And so maybe we feel like we can't do anything, and so the overwhelming burden of it all gets us to just stay silent and not do anything. But I think that there's individual things that we can all do with our daily lives, and as our lives go on, that would dramatically affect it. And one of the things that does come to mind that I'm gonna kind of throw out there, just because of the spiritual testimony and upbringing that I had. If you look at pornography, you're a part of the problem.
Yeah.
That was explicit in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the beginning, if you go watch the movie, and we're not going to spoil anything for you, but, and again, there's nothing graphic, and you don't see anything, but, it's very much understood what was going on and what was being shared. And it's the, desire for pornographic material that is driving a lot of this. And so, hey, if you're listening to us and that's something you're struggling with, please, seek that spiritual help that you need, and I hope that we can be a spiritual encouragement to you. But be warned, if nothing else, like this is, like you're creating the demand, and so that weighed really heavy on me. Not that I'm not, I can say with a clear conscience, I don't look at that stuff anymore. I did before Christ, but I don't anymore. But we have created the demand in America. Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, we did. We have an episode a few months ago we did with Jim Tillotson. You can have victory over pornography. It's possible. And even as we have Zach here, he can talk about that as well. But that's a strong desire amongst people, but it is. And when people begin the process of looking at softcore pornography into more hardcore, into just outright perversion, and one of which is child pornography. I'm reminded of, I actually listened to an interview with Tim Ballard following watching the movie, and he described his interaction the first time he was brought into, as a person of the Department of Homeland Security. All right, we need you to help with sex crimes. And so he goes, and what does he have to do? He has to watch the material. And as we see in the movie too, and catalog what takes place in order that the jury, they don't have to see it. He can simply describe it for them, and they'll just know what it is. And not only he described, and he didn't go into any details, but he described there were 3 little boys, the one that he saw the first time. And I have 3 boys,
Yeah.
And the violence that was being perpetrated against them, that kind of thing was what he was describing. And it doesn't start there. It begins with something subtle and small, and it grows into this sort of disgusting evil that takes place, pushing the boundaries. Tim Ballard said, of the next thing you could essentially, shaking your fist at God, go to the next perversion, to the next perversion, to the next one.
Yeah. Sin is not dormant, is not stagnant.
Yeah.
Sin left unchecked grows and develops, and you will do things that you never thought you would do if you don't repent and check your sin.
Yeah, and I want to encourage anybody, if you're struggling with that, you got to go talk to your pastor. You got to go talk to a godly individual who can shepherd you, who can help you and care for you. Be honest about it. And victory is attainable if you would bring out sin is like something that when it's put under the rug, where you sweep it under the rug and you hide it, it just grows and festers. But if you bring it out to the light, it'll die. So I encourage you to be that wise in that way. So.
Yeah, but so just throw that out there, kind of repeat my question. Like after you guys walked out of there, what was your kind of gut reaction to what do we do? And now after you've had some time to sit on it a little bit, has that changed or what kind of comes to mind for you now?
That was something me and Sean Kennedy and I were riding home afterward, and we were kind of tossing that question around. And we kind of summarized our thinking with this, that most men, again, as I'm saying this, I'm really kind of talking to people that have seen the movie, because what we're talking about is kind of reflections on it. If you haven't seen it, go see it. But as we drove home, the thought was, okay, most men can't or won't have the opportunity to go run a sting operation down in Colombia.
Right.
Most will not have that opportunity. Bottom line, I say bottom line because I think there's more than just this, but bottom line is to be able to link up with a nonprofit organization like Tim Ballard's, was it called the Underground?
Yep, the Underground Railroad.
Underground Railroad.
Yep.
To be able to maybe financially support organizations that are working into that end. But we never just want to stop with the financial side of things because it's too easy. It's just like, okay, I've got an automatic withdrawal coming out of my bank account on the 15th of every month. I'm doing my job. But is that really what we're going to do, is just leave it at that? And so Sean and I continued to chat and talk about this. One of the things that came to mind was when you leave the movie, you're gonna be stirred emotionally.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to sound like wishy-washy or like just like crying after some emotional movie, but if you have any sense of justice at all, you're gonna leave with a weight in your chest, maybe some tears. It may be sadness, it may be anger, it may be a feeling of we've got to go do something. We got to go right now. We have to find the balance there, and I think we find that balance in prayer. And in thought, we at Theologic are planning at some point just to sit down with some coffee and just kind of dialogue over what happened as we watched that movie. But I would say prayerfully think about, okay, God, or ask God to show you, okay, what do I need to take away? What convictions should I be praying about? How are you going to lead me to act on what I've heard and seen? Because there's nothing wrong with an emotional response to a film, but if it ends there and 48 hours later that has just worn off and you're back to just life as usual, then it didn't really do anything. Mm-hmm. So that time of being impacted should be a time of thinking and praying and just asking God, what do you want from me? And some immediate things that start coming to my mind, I just want to share, again, coming from as a father in this, was thinking about what I saw in that movie, and not so much thinking about being the antithesis, like of the guys that are trafficking and the guys that are abusing, not so much focusing on being the antithesis of that, but thinking about, okay, these are godless men doing some very, very great damage. But what does it look like for a godly man to do some unimaginable good? What does it look like to raise my children to love justice? And this is something that I began to think about, was when eventually I would hope that my children will watch this movie. Not right now, they're too young. But in years to come, when they're teenagers and Hannah and I sit down and watch this with them, I want them to leave the movie with that same feeling of conviction and angst and desire to see something done. I want to train my daughters, I want those in my life to love justice. And so again, this isn't the full answer of what do we do to see sex trafficking stopped. But I think one of the first steps we can consider is, how do we learn to love justice, and how do we learn to encourage those closest to us to also have the same kind of conviction? Because one day I'm going to be dead and in the grave, but there's a possibility that I could leave 3 daughters who love the righteousness of God and want to see this carried on, because evil will continue, and we need to have generations rising up that are going to want to see justice done, and done with zeal.
I think it starts with letting the understanding of what you saw really do germinate. I think Sean talked a little bit about that. Movements aren't very often something that happen immediately after a movie comes. It's like we don't expect that now there's going to be a huge anti-sex trafficking coalition tomorrow. We recognize that maybe the starting point for us is really just what we're doing now in this podcast. Just refer people to watch this. Tell people we saw this was good. You need to see this and let it stir you, as Sean says, and find an opportunity as you prayerfully seek out. Maybe what you'll see is what I saw a little bit when I was there. This is a mission field of people that, on the one end, from a pastoral standpoint, from a minister of the gospel standpoint, these people are doing what unbelievers will do, left to their own devices, choosing the pathway they're going. And would there be those who would receive Christ even out of that group? So there's a part of me that says that. On the other end, there's a part of me that maybe what Zach is feeling as a police officer, they need to be brought to justice, and there's that element of it as well. So it's like both of those things go in tandem, and what can a Christian do to be a part of these things is the question as well. So
the way I would kind of articulate that balance would be something along these lines. if you're a Christian Tim Ballard, again, this is just a kind of example, trying to exemplify what I'm thinking. As you're putting the trafficker in cuffs, you're sharing the gospel with him. Like he's on his way to jail, and whatever justice is going to be done to him. But at the same time, that does not mean you cannot be sharing the gospel with this individual. And even should he repent and come to Christ for grace, he still needs to go on to face justice for what he did.
Right.
So I don't think there's a contradiction in those ideas. I think you can literally be putting cuffs on a trafficker while you're sharing the gospel with them and be in complete continuity of your train of thought.
Right. I agree. I'm actually curious, Zach, as a police officer and as an Iowa rep, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I guess I walked out not thinking so much about my role in law enforcement. I mean, for sure, there's that role. I guess my role specifically is just a road trooper, is do the best that I can to be observant. I actually filled out an intelligence report based off of a traffic stop that I made that I thought that there was some, at least for sure, neglect of care, if not some time of trafficking situation just a couple days ago. And so it's being vigilant, I guess. But I guess I left more so just with a lot of anger towards how our entire culture just behaves. The obvious is, yes, I'm upset that there's even a desire to do these things that would create the atmosphere for this type of trafficking. But my wife knows better than anybody that when I hear something that really strikes a chord, I really have to struggle not to get super amped up about it. And so I came home and she did a good job of calming me down in conversation. I think that she knows that, or at least I hope she knows, maybe she'll listen to this, that I love her dearly and that I do desire to express my feelings with her. But sometimes it comes out as being directed at her when it's really just me trying to process out loud. And so I went home after the movie and I was very just kind of amped up. I mean, in the movie, not spoiling anything, you see actual footage of kids being taken from parents.
Yeah.
And
right at the beginning.
Yeah, right at the beginning.
It's like security camera reels.
Yeah. Like, right. But really my comments towards my wife were, it's time to take our heads out of the clouds. Like, if you're a parent with children, it is your obligation to defend them.
Right.
From the evil world. And you don't have a choice.
Right.
And
your responsibility before God.
Yeah. And so I look at a culture that is very consumed with I shouldn't say consumed, just distracted. It convicted me not to be so distracted. It convicted me not to be paranoid, but to be prepared.
Yeah.
Jesus tells us not to be anxious about anything. So I'm not trying to advocate for being anxious, but what I am trying to advocate for is, like, if you don't have this borderline visceral response to defending your children from evil and the things that go on, like, I don't know if you have a pulse, And so I walked out of there thinking, like, I will do whatever it takes to be prepared to defend my family and my children, because what is very apparent, and this is why I think my point is relevant, is they don't care where they get these kids from.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether they trick them or they steal them or somebody brings them, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to them. These traffickers, just cartel folks, they just want to profit off of all this stuff, over my dead body.
Right.
Will that happen to any of my kids? And so it's just being vigilant about the world around us. Really, it's having an understanding of how evil the world is, and understanding that we aren't, like, apart to, to go along with your point there, Packy, is that apart from Christ, this is the evil inclination of the heart. Yeah. And so I don't trust that the world has my children's best interest in mind. In fact, it's the opposite.
Amen.
And so that made me want to go even further to make sure that my beautiful, innocent children, I am not putting them in compromising positions. I am not... and I'm just using these examples as things that went through my mind. I'm not condemning anybody, but how I don't know how many times I walk around the grocery store. I've done it, but how many times you're walking around with your head in your phone?
Mm-hmm.
You like lift up your eyes and look around at what's going on. Nothing might be happening to you, but how often did something happen to somebody else that we missed because our heads were just in the clouds? I think that what you guys are saying is so valuable, and it's good for me to hear, because my initial inclination is maybe not to pray and not to patiently ponder, but to get amped up and then think like, just send me to Colombia then. Like, just send me down there.
Yeah.
Like, I will go find these people.
Now, let me say this.
And I will kill them.
Well, let me say this though. Like, I'll say this going into the movie. Not that I was expecting like a voice out of the clouds, but you and men like you came to mind.
Yeah.
Because without going into too much detail, but to use a very well-known line from the movie Taken, you have a particular set of skills that can make yourself a nuisance.
Yeah.
And so going into that, I was thinking, like I said earlier, most of us are not going down to sting operations.
Yeah.
But that does not necessitate that nobody actually hops on an airplane with some particular tools and goes to do some work.
Right.
And I think I can say that as a Christian, that's not just some careless maverick idea.
Right.
Yeah.
We've talked about stuff kind of like that with justice on this podcast before. But again, not to derail that, but at the same time, though, I would just point that out that there are men that have, through various opportunities in life, been given a particular set of skills.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And as you said, the gospel work can go hand in hand with even that kind of. I mean, like, I'm just envisioning. I'm not saying that this is a thing, but could there be missionaries that go from church to church and say, "Hey, I'm raising support. I'm on this mission board. I'm raising support to go down to this field. I know there's trafficking here. It's going to be dangerous, but I'm going down in order to rescue kids. I'm going to go down as well to impart the gospel." Maybe this is something that our churches need to be thinking through. Okay, how can churches financially support a theologically sound Christian who might be led this way?
Yeah.
Just a thought.
And I would like to just read. So I shared Proverbs 24:11 through 12. Just a few verses later in chapter 24 and verse 19 and 20, the writer of Proverbs says, "Do not fret because of evildoers. Do not be jealous of the wicked, for there will be no future for the evil one. The lamp of the wicked will go out."
Amen.
Yeah, I liked how Sean brought up the tension, and Zach elaborated on it a little bit. Just this prayer doesn't mean just sit there and do nothing, but at the same time, I also, just as a personal reminder, he will take care of evil, and in the end, he will wipe it out, and it will not prevail. And in that we can have hope, and in that we can have strength. But yeah, I just
isn't the wrath of God a good thing?
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
yeah.
Is that a plug for a future episode?
Maybe.
I mean, but yeah, and then starting in verse 21, it says, "My son, fear Yahweh."
Yeah.
And so I think that
fear of the Lord.
Yeah. I think that for some people, the problem might be maybe what I struggle with, and it's not really going to my knees and seeking the Lord's direction.
Yeah.
And then for others, it might be, "Hey, listen, I'm really thankful that you're praying, but like, get up and go, and go do, and that was kind of like where I was personally convicted in both atmospheres as I walked away, because again, we just live in a state of just distraction. This is not this isn't scare tactics or anything like that. I think I'm just personally speaking honestly. If you think that these people care, they don't. They don't care about you.
Yeah.
They don't care about your kids.
Yeah.
They don't care about your family. They care about making money. We learned that at the border firsthand. What's interesting about like the smuggling and the trafficking is the people doing it, for the most part, don't even engage in the behavior that they're perpetuating.
Right.
A lot of these people don't do drugs. A lot of these people aren't using these individuals for sex or work. It's just a way for them to make money. What's my point? Parents, I think you have a biblical obligation to love your children and to love your neighbor, and that doesn't always necessarily look like giving somebody $5 or putting clothes on their back. Maybe loving my son, loving my daughter, loving my neighbor is I'm not just so caught up in my own stuff as I walk around the world, but I'm actually paying attention to the world around me because I might miss them being in need.
Yep.
You know, I might miss the fact that somebody is out there trying to get them. You know, and I've talked to people when my wife and I used to live in Des Moines, and there was a couple that I don't know if they still go to that church or not, but she shared with us a story about being stalked and approached in a grocery store by somebody she thought was probably a trafficker. It's not to scare anybody to go to the grocery store. Go to the grocery store. Like I'm not advocating to live in fear, and I wholeheartedly believe that what Jesus says about us not being anxious about anything is what we should listen to our Lord.
Yeah,
I'm just simply saying, like, these things happen.
Yeah,
and we have to understand that this is how evil men act.
Mm-hmm.
And so
spiritual warfare.
Yeah, it's 100%. And I'm actually glad you said that because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, let me just put some flesh on that real quick. I know we probably got to start wrapping up this episode, but the reason I say spiritual warfare is because what we're talking about right now is one big spoke in the whole wheel of what has been recently called the culture of death, where it's one spoke among many things. And let's consider our culture for a moment. I say culture of death, and we live amid it. Like we're among a very potent culture that is just focused on death. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so we just talked about this dynamic. Let's take another dynamic. Let's think about the abortion industry. Okay?
Yeah.
That is straight up death. You can't get more focused on death than a program that is focused on like immediately, intentionally, physically ending life. So there you go. You've got the issue that is arising more and more and has been for 5 to 10 years about gender fluidity and boys becoming girls, girls becoming boys, where doctors, people that have gone to the great universities of our nation are prescribing drugs that will sterilize people.
But that's not death, though, Sean, is it?
Because when you sterilize people, that's a death of a generation.
That's right.
That is a death of a generation. Yeah. So we're talking about sex trafficking. That is death in its own sense, where there is damage. Where when we talk about the culture of death, okay, maybe a life isn't ending, but unless you're encouraging life in the way that God designed and desires it to be, you're participating in the culture of death.
Yeah.
There's abortion. There's the sterilizing of a generation that will stunt human development, if you will, or human flourishing. Yeah. And all of this goes back, so we observe this in many other things, but all this goes back to the Garden of Eden. When God said there'll be enmity between the woman's seed and the seed of the serpent, and there'll be enmity between these. We see that played out throughout the entirety of Scripture. Namely, we think about Pharaoh going on the young children or the young boys in Egypt and drowning them. Okay. And we fast forward to a very similar story when King Herod goes after the small children of Bethlehem. There has always been an outright war on children. There is a theology behind the idea of a culture of death. There's biblical context that we can better understand our cultural context. Yeah. That what's happening is not just random. It's not just, we happen to be going through a darker season of human history. No, this has been happening from the beginning. Yeah. Now, in our particular context, we are seeing a very potent reality, but it all goes back to spiritual warfare. Yeah. Satan is alive and well. His demons, his minions, alive and well. And so these things that we were talking about, we can take practical steps in various ways, whether it's financially or being a part of an organization or various other ways that we can participate in ending sex trafficking. But we cannot forget what's behind it. If we just think it's only just man being men, no. Man is sinful. You know where theologic stands on that. We believe that man is sinful, but we also believe in a very real devil. Yeah. And so this is something that I just want to bring in as kind of some context as we think about this situation, that what we've talked about is one spoke in the overall wheel of the culture of death. It surrounds us. It's all around us. And so be aware of that. And I would just close up my time here just saying, go see the movie. Yeah. It's uncomfortable, but think about the uncomfort that you're worried about experiencing by sitting watching a movie compared to the unimaginable pain that these children. So afford yourself a little bit of discomfort to have a better appreciation for what's going on that your eyes are close to. You can't read enough statistics. You can't look at enough data. As Jim Caviezel points out, stories portray truth in a way that stats can't. So you need to go see this.
So, yeah, and I would say as I close my commentary on it, go see it and bring some tissues. If you're prone to cry, if you're prone to weeping, bring some tissues. We experience that in the theater as well. So
Yeah, we just wrap up by saying, be a loving parent, be vigilant, be ready to defend your family physically and spiritually. It's a great movie. Please go see it. It's worth your time. It's worth your money. And again, I just give credit to my wife too. She said, she kind of pointed out some of the same things that Sean did. It's like, you can't just do those things. And she was looking at me, referring to some of the things that I do and like to do. And so, just some of the things that we're thinking about, getting a hold of.
It's called Operation Underground
there
Railroad.
It is. Thank you for correcting that.
Yep.
I got it wrong earlier. Yeah, just be prepared to help these people who are coming out of these victimized situations. So, but anyway, for the 10th time, please go see the movie. It's worth your time. And thanks again for listening in. Please stay tuned to more theological content.